I was once adored by many as the epitome of the perfect teacher, someone idealized like Eleanor. But the very student I was determined to help drugged me, and while I was drifting in and out of consciousness, calling out for my husband, he slipped his hand under my shirt. Afterwards, he shamelessly bragged about it, spreading our intimate video far and wide. What's so special about Eleanor? I've already had her, and she's just average. I fell from grace, from being praised by everyone, to being dragged through the mud. Later, my husband divorced me, my parents endured the scorn of others, and I was fired from Jefferson High School. Unable to bear the online harassment, I jumped off the rooftop of the school. When I came back to life, it was the day that boy transferred into our class. Once again, I stood on the podium in my senior year class, wearing a familiar bohemian dress, my feet in white sandals, exuding grace. I was still that young, beautiful literature teacher. A new transfer student, who was economically disadvantaged, was assigned to our class today, his first day. The moment he walked in, everyone turned to look at him curiously, whispering, "Holy crap, how could someone be so ugly?" My excitement just got doused. I'm not trying to bully the new guy, but he's making me physically nauseous. Sorry, not sorry. He hobbled in, with a noticeable limp on his left foot, his tanned face covered in acne scars, and a large, black mole the size of a nickel beneath his bulbous nose. "Hello everyone, I'm the new transfer student. Please take care of me." At that moment, he greeted the class with a shy smile, but his gaze was fixed on me. I suddenly stopped breathing. Samuel Brooks. No matter how many lifetimes pass, I can never forget that name, the hatred simmering alongside my memories. In my previous life, I pitted him for being a low-income student, stood up to those who bullied him, bought him new clothes, and taught him how to carry himself with dignity. But on one stormy night, Samuel followed me as I walked home alone. I kindly let him in to escape the rain, only for him to secretly drug my water. I lay on the sofa to rest, groggily calling out for my husband as his trembling hands unbuttoned my shirt. But I lost consciousness, powerless to resist. The next day, I woke up covered in red and purple marks, panic-stricken. I reported it to the police immediately, but he had vanished without a trace. During the days Samuel was missing, I lived in constant fear. Until I saw the high-definition video circulating in every group chat, captioned, "Isn't she Eleanor? I've already had her, and she's just average." The woman in the video, being violated, gasping and sobbing for mercy, was me. The internet exploded with discussions, as earlier candid photos of me had gone viral, with netizens praising my prom queen face, my Eleanor aura. Prom queen teacher fakes drunkenness to seduce student, unfit to be a teacher. He didn't step forward to admit what he had done. Instead, he hid in the shadows, sending me an anonymous text, "Mrs. Anderson, now you and I are both in the mud. Be with me, and I'll treat you well." In the end, unable to endure the online harassment, I jumped off the Jefferson rooftop, desperate. I was 3 months pregnant at the time. I had fallen from being revered as Eleanor to plunging into endless torment. But now, as I stood on this 3-foot podium again, looking down at the students, I knew the gears of fate were turning. This was my chance to save myself. He lifted his head, speaking in broken English, "The spring flows silently, the tree's shade reflects the calm. Mrs. Hale, my name is Samuel Brooks, from the spring." The class erupted in whispers. "Did you say that on purpose or by accident? Do you know our teacher's name is Shades Hale?" He paused, then looked up at me with a bashful smile. Our eyes met, and I shivered all over, forcing myself to calm down. After all, in this life, he knew nothing, and I could still stop everything from happening. "The new student is here. Who would like to sit with him?" Since he started school late, he was older than his peers, already 20, and still looked unattractive. The class fell silent, no one wanted to be his desk partner. Just then, Clara Mitchell, the class president, volunteered. "Mrs. Hale, I'm the class president. It's my duty to unite our classmates. I'll sit with the new student." Looking at Clara's kind and righteous face, so much like my past self, I coldly said, "I heard you had a poor academic foundation before transferring. I'm worried you might hold Clara back. It's better if you sit alone in the last row." There were plenty of empty seats without partners in the classroom, but I chose the most biased approach. He was puzzled, seemingly not expecting me to be so cold and even intentionally difficult. Samuel's lips twitched slightly, murmuring to himself, "How could it be? Mrs. Hale looks so gentle. How could she discriminate against me too?" Every word he spoke sent chills down my spine. After finishing the lesson, I practically fled to the office, my back drenched in cold sweat. I drank a gulp of scalding tea, but felt nothing. My mind raced. Should I resign now and avoid all this? Getting this teaching position hadn't been easy. It took countless nights of studying late into the night. Senior year teachers weren't allowed to switch classes, and I was responsible for students preparing for college entrance exams. Why should I give everything up because of him? I sat in a daze, my thoughts drifting until it was time to leave. Christopher Lane arrived to pick me up, waiting at the school entrance for half an hour. Seeing me come downstairs, he hurriedly opened the car door, pulling me into his arms. "Sweetheart, you're not feeling well. Did something happen?" Smelling his warm, familiar scent, I couldn't hold back my emotions any longer and broke down in tears. My husband and I had a great relationship. In my past life, he divorced me temporarily to protect me from the online harassment, and we moved to another city under new identities. Later, seeing how much pain I was in, he even took a knife to find Samuel, only to have his grandmother shield him. Christopher was then outwitted and fell, never to rise again, in a pool of blood. Facing Christopher's still handsome face, I wiped away my tears and managed a smile. "It's nothing, just not feeling well. Let's go home." Christopher, however, was deeply concerned, insisting on taking me to the hospital for a checkup. I couldn't resist him. An hour later, the rushed blood test results came back. I was pregnant. It was at this moment that I realized I was already carrying Christopher's child. When he discovered I was pregnant, Christopher joyfully picked me up and spun me around. "Sweetheart, this is amazing. We're going to have our little baby. If it's a girl, that would be perfect. I've always wanted a little shades, just as beautiful and lovely as you." I smiled through my tears, silently vowing. This time I would protect this hard-won happiness. The next day, I went to teach as usual, though my voice was hoarse from the previous day, so I brought a voice amplifier. The sound was loud, drowning out all chaotic emotions. I didn't look toward that corner, but instead focused on teaching peacefully. A few days passed, and everything was calm. Until Thursday afternoon, after I had finished my last class and was heading back to the office, a few female students were supporting Samuel Brooks, blocking my path. He was evidently bullied, reeking of the bathroom, covered in bruises, and his limp even more pronounced. But I knew that this pitiful appearance was just a mask hiding his twisted nature. He was strong, yet never fought back, letting the bullies have their way with him. His fingernails were long, filled with grime, and his left hand was a bloody mess, with a chunk of skin missing from his index finger. The wound was terrifying. "Mrs. Hale, Samuel's been bullied. His finger got smashed, and a piece of skin came off. What should we do?" The girls in my class were full of righteousness, standing up for him. Samuel looked at me pitifully, his nose scrunching up in pain, making his oily face even more disgusting. "Please help me, Mrs. Hale." I didn't want to care and asked the students to take him to the nurse's office, turning to leave. But the class representative, Emma Parker, urgently called out to me. "Mrs. Hale, I remember you have a first aid kit in your office. The nurse's office is too far. Could you bandage him up first?" I stopped, looking at his pleading eyes and the blood still flowing from his finger. Just then, the class bell rang urgently. I suddenly nodded. "All right, come with me. The rest of you go back to class." Samuel's lips curled into a barely noticeable, cunning smile. He followed me to the office, which was empty during class time. I casually opened the first aid kit, taking out alcohol, tweezers, and gauze. "Sit down. I'll bandage you up." At that moment, the wind blew the curtains, causing the seashell wind chime by the window to sway gently. I carefully and gently stopped the bleeding for him. As I looked at him, his face suddenly turned red. "What's the matter?" I asked. "Mrs. Hale, you're so beautiful." Samuel's face flushed as he blurted out the compliment, his eyes suddenly fixated on my collarbone. Taking advantage of his distraction, I smiled and plunged his entire finger into the alcohol bottle. The exposed flesh of his finger, raw and deep enough to see the bone, was firmly submerged in the nearly full medical alcohol. "You need to be good and cooperate with the disinfection, okay?" He was terrified, trying to pull away, his face contorting in pain. "It hurts, Mrs. Hale, it really hurts."